Story 1. My brother reported the issue, got fired, and his benefits were canceled immediately. The company involved is a well-known large corporation. Unfortunately, he had difficulty finding a lawyer willing to take the case. They also blacklisted him in his industry, preventing him from finding another job. The lawsuit took 10 years to resolve due to the company's resources. After time spent and attorney's fees, the case was awarded to my brother, but the amount he received was equivalent to just 1 year of his previous salary. If you asked my brother whether it was worth it, he would say it was not, because life is not fair, and wealthy people often avoid consequences. He has never recovered from this experience and now hates his life. Story 2. Report it. I do not want to work for a place that would fire me for reporting illegal activity. That will not lead anywhere good. It is best to get out now with your integrity intact. Story 3. Depending on the type of illegal activity, you can always report it anonymously. I regret not reporting illegal drug use at my workplace before an incident occurred. The individual almost caused a fatal accident involving a crew. There were no injuries, only expensive property damage and a very close call. The individual refused a drug test and was fired on the same day. Story 4. I reported wage theft against me and my team. We were paid incorrectly for 9 out of the 10 years I actively worked for the company. I documented everything, including copies of crucial emails, and involved the workplace regulator. It was a long fight to get back pay for both current and former employees who had also been paid incorrectly. Unfortunately, because I refused to follow the company line and sweep the issue under the rug, I became a target for my fellow line managers. I was focused on doing right by my team as their manager. They made my work life difficult, trying to push me out by imposing more restrictions and limiting my ability to do my job. I ended up breaking under the harassment, which affected my mental health and perception of reality. I believe I did the right thing by standing up and speaking out, but it cost me my career and added strain to my home and family relationships. If I encountered this situation again, I would still speak up, but I would try to approach it differently to avoid exposing myself as much. Story 5. Seeing as all the major whistleblowers have had nothing but terrible personal consequences and absolutely zero consequences for the individual or corporate offender, why would anyone want to put their own job and life at risk? Story 6. It always goes poorly for the whistleblower. I know. Our school contributed 50% to a charity that bought violins for our strings program. The violins were garbage. I made a lot of enemies getting that reversed, and it affected my music teaching career for a while. Story 7. If your workplace would fire you for reporting illegal activity, then they must be inviting a lawsuit. It is the easiest lawsuit I have ever seen, my friend. Story 8. Depends on how badly you need the money from that job. If that job was my only option in the area and paid well, then I would keep my mouth shut. If I could easily get another job or a better job, I would report it as soon as possible. Story 9. I would report the illegal activity through the proper internal channels, such as human resources or a compliance officer. Integrity and ethical conduct are non-negotiable for me. While there may be personal risk, allowing illegal behavior to continue could harm others and the organization long-term. If internal reporting fails, I would consider external whistleblower protections. Doing the right thing matters more than temporary job security. Story 10. Why would you want to work for an untrustworthy company like that? Get organized, find a new job, then leave the company behind. Story 11. I do not think there is enough information here. Illegal activity? Relabeling made in America is no big deal, but causing personal injury or harm to innocent people is a major issue. Am I in danger of jail time if I do not report this? Am I actually engaging in illegal activity? That is not acceptable. Also, am I making very little money or am I being paid significantly? This would influence my decision. Story 12. I attended a class taught by the woman who exposed the Enron scandal. She has met hundreds of whistleblowers and says only one of them was entirely happy with the outcome. That said, many would have done it again. Whistleblowers tend to face significant retaliation and many never work in their original industry again. In some countries, depending on what was revealed, whistleblowers may be awarded compensation by the government. For example, a person involved in exposing the subprime mortgage scandal received a few $1,000,000. Story 13. Since health insurance is tied to your employment in this post-country, I would unfortunately have to stay quiet and act ignorant if anything comes out. I am not going to lose my source of income and my health insurance for reporting something that the company will probably just be able to buy their way out of. Story 14. Document everything you can without arousing suspicion. Make multiple copies and hard copies. Store and hide them safely. Contact a lawyer. Bonus: a sympathetic media contact or outlet and a book deal. Story 15. I work for a court. I do not think this situation would ever apply. I would need to know more about what this illegal activity is and how it affects others. Story 16. Lawyer and report. The legal activities usually lead to unsafe situations, and that is not something I want on my mind. Story 17. Need much more context. If I am not getting any kind of payoff, I am at least protecting myself by reporting something. Regardless, unless it is a truly horrible human rights violation at stake, I am 100% doing whatever is best for me personally. Story 18. Depends on what kind of illegal activity. Honestly, I have never worked anywhere that did not do at least something illegal. However, none of it put anyone in danger, and it did not affect me negatively, so I have never lost any sleep over it. Story 19. It depends on how deep your morals and convictions are. It is situational to a degree which you decide. If you do whistleblow, do not expect any of your coworkers, no matter how close you think they are to you, to ever leave or stand up for you. Their income, social position, or other interests are more important to them. Story 20. If my silence causes people to get hurt, I will report to everyone who will listen. There is no non-disclosure agreement strong enough to stop my unfiltered speech. No job is worth it. Story 21. It depends on many factors. What is the illegal activity? Is it actively harming others? Is anyone's life in danger? Or is it more like, my boss is insider trading? Would reporting it put myself or anyone else's life in danger? For example, if my company was illegally employing immigrants and reporting it could get them deported, obviously I would not report it. Other factors to consider include how much I need the job, my current financial situation, how much I like the company and the people within and running it, and much more. The question is not as clear-cut and black and white as the original poster imagined. Story 22. If this were the past, I would not recommend whistleblowing. You do not gain anything from whistleblowing. If you are offered a large amount of money and protection, there is a chance, but generally it is better to remain silent. It is like coming across someone being attacked. I would just figure out how to leave as quickly as possible. Story 23. Stay silent as long as it does not affect your work or endanger anyone. For example, marijuana. At every construction job I have worked, the boss smoked marijuana with me. Story 24. Staying silent does not protect you. It makes you an accomplice. It also makes you a worthless coward. Story 25. I do not want to work in a place where illegal activity occurs, especially when people are affected. I encountered such a situation and reported it first to management. This was a good decision because the activity had gone unnoticed by them since it was limited to one department. Their jobs were affected, not mine. Story 26. I report it, and if I get fired for it, I report that to the employment authorities. Unlike in the United States, that will not end well for them here. Story 27. As much as I love legal life, sometimes it's better to stay silent and mind our own business. If someone has something illegal hidden, they are most likely dangerous. If I am absolutely alone in the world, I would report them. Otherwise, I would never risk my family or friends' lives. Unless they bother me personally or do something truly disgusting, I focus on my work and do not care. People can be cruel, and they will often take revenge on someone weaker, such as your parents. Story 28. So my options are to say nothing or to report and sue the company for wrongful termination. How is this a hard choice? Story 29. 1. Is there a reasonable way I can gather evidence to prove my claim? Is there any actual harm being done? For example, it is not a trivial law being broken, like a minor law about carrying ice cream in your pocket. If the answer to the first question is yes, but the second is no, collect evidence for use later. If the answer to the second question is yes, under any circumstances, report it, but try to gather evidence to use in your upcoming wrongful termination lawsuit. Story 30. In my experience, anyone who reports it eventually gets harmed. Human resources and legal departments protect management and the corporation regardless of the severity. Story 31. I was in a situation at work where I saw a vice president behaving unprofessionally. I kept my mouth shut and looked the other way. The vice president has many friends in upper management who would support him. Reporting it would do nothing. Story 32. It depends on what it is and how serious I think it is. I could either send an anonymous email to a superior who I believe might be responsive or contact the governing body responsible for enforcement. Story 33. I have already been in this position and reported it. My employer was violating anti-terrorism laws by smuggling controlled equipment into the Middle East, and I sent the federal authorities copies of the shipping labels of the shipment being sent to the smuggler. The federal authorities called my boss and said, "I think you're missing some export paperwork and taxes." Story 34. Option C. Report it to the company head and ask for a raise. If they decline and do nothing to fix the illegal issue, report them. Story 35. Honestly, I owe work nothing and I do not really care what my coworkers do, except if it is a direct threat to someone's physical safety. If they want me to be a police officer, they can add a police officer's salary to what they are already paying me. Story 36. Nice try, work. I am a federal contractor, and Dogecoin engages in illegal activities every day that are reported, and no one cares. Story 37. I've been here. The problem was that the company was so small that it would have left me with no job, whether the company fired me for whistleblowing or simply closed its doors because the people in charge got in trouble. At the time, I needed the paycheck. I literally had no other choice. I hated it. My personal sense of right and wrong screamed at me every time the person running the show did something immoral or illegal. He used to buy items from eBay and report them as lost in transit frequently. We would get customers returning products that we had sold because they didn't work. He would smash the boxes, send the customer a picture and say, "You haven't wrapped it properly," or "The courier delivered it like this, so we can't honor your warranty," and then tell them to claim from the shipping company. He boasted about a customer who brought in a laptop for urgent data recovery. He disassembled the hard drive and tried to put the platters into a new drive. Of course, it didn't work and completely prevented any further recovery attempts because he had opened the hard drive. This customer sued him. She turned out to be a lawyer, and the data she needed to recover related to a very serious court case. The judge awarded her damages in a large amount. Within 2 days, he closed the company, changed all the signage, and moved all the front-of-house staff to the back room. When the bailiffs came to collect, they were told, "We've never heard of company name. We've only been here for a month." He thought he was clever. I finally started taking a stand when he tried to use me to do dishonest work. He asked me to transfer company funds to religious organizations run by his associates. I am almost certain this was a money laundering scheme at best, and possibly funding something more serious at worst. I refused. I told him I was not comfortable making those transactions. My instincts told me he was setting me up to be the fall guy if things went wrong. I had nothing to do with this, officer. I don't have the login information for that part of the business. The only person who does is me, and I did not authorize any of these transactions. I kept asking him to put it in writing. He refused. I ended up leaving the company about 6 months later. I was basically bullied out the door. Story 38. It depends on how I feel that day, but I will document and record that information for sure and keep it in my back pocket for the day they decide to try and cross me. Story 39. If it is not affecting me or hurting anyone, then I do not care. It is not my company, and while they pay me very little, I will starve without it. Story 40. You quietly gather evidence where it does not leave a paper trail that leads to you, such as sending emails to your own personal account. Once you have enough evidence and are certain of the situation, You make sure your evidence clearly shows what is going on. Then, and only then, do you go to some authority to become a whistleblower. You stay quiet at work and log every interaction with management in your own private record that they cannot access. Continue logging any evidence of your interactions with them or of the original problem you are reporting. The issue is not just what they are doing, but also any retaliation that may come your way, so you document that as well. The best approach is to play dumb and keep doing your job unless your personal safety is at risk. Story 41. I spent many years working in bars and restaurants. If you cannot keep your mouth shut about illegal activity, you are not cut out for that life. Story 42. The question is, what happens if you do not report it but get caught? The risk versus reward of staying silent will determine whether to inform. Story 43. My idealistic self says I would report it. The realist in me says it depends on the illegal activity and the scope of harm. Especially since, for better or worse, I am now a single income earner with expenses and need to afford to live. Story 44. I refused to sign off on something and lost not just my job, but it took me several years to get another engineering job. I was within a month or two of losing my house. I was able to get a temporary job stuffing boxes in a warehouse. There were faulty pressure welds on a submarine that likely would have killed every sailor on board. Someone would have alerted the Queen, and she would have made a speech about the tragedy. The president would have been briefed on it. The faults made national news. Apparently, they still tell stories about me there. I resigned in fury, challenged them to do better, be better, and to take the work seriously. I was 7 feet tall with arms like tree trunks. Story 45. Firing an employee for reporting illegal activity is called retaliation, and it is also illegal. Report it. You cannot be legally penalized for doing so. Story 46. Keep my mouth shut to avoid stress. Not my circus, not my monkeys. If someone else reports and I get questioned, I will speak truthfully. But I am not the one doing that report. I frankly just do not care enough about the inconvenience. Story 47. Illegal in what way? On a scale from human trafficking to failing to report that a vendor bought me coffee, where do we stand? Story 48. My work has an anonymous speak-up line and multiple written policies, stating that not reporting illegal activity is a disciplinary offense. If I am afraid of it coming back to harm me, I will call that number. Story 49. In my role, I am a mandated reporter. If I do not report, I can also be held liable. If I see something untoward, I report. Story 50. Staying silent makes you an accessory to whatever illegal acts are taking place. Protect yourself and quit the job. Story 51. I have thought about this recently, and the answer is that I stay silent. I would have to be much closer to retirement to deal with being excluded from my industry. I have a family to take care of, and I do not trust that I would receive a reward worth the hardship. Story 52. I took the risk and I would do it again. No job is worth my self-esteem, at least nothing that matches my skill set. My first job as a resume writer turned out to be for a point-of-sale scamming operation targeting primarily older folks who needed to re-enter the job market and did not know any better. Basically, he was charging thousands of dollars for designer resume suites that were not designer resumes and could not be parsed by an applicant tracking system. Most of the content was boilerplate with each client's information simply pasted in. He kept upselling and charging extra for additional services, such as $1,000 for 1,500 resume hits, which he outsourced to View Farms and bought farms for pennies on the dollar. This also did not make sense for a resume. He was holding their resumes hostage for months or even years. When I started, there was a 2-year backlog of about 15 clients. If a new client paid extra, they would be placed at the front of the line. There were often physical documents like certificates, diplomas, degrees, and military service medals that clients provided with their paperwork. It took me a few months to realize what was happening, as all the scammy activity was compartmentalized away from my role, which was writing and actual resume work. I was distracted by the good pay and having my own office for the first time. Once I caught on, I started collecting evidence over 2 months while still working there. Then he stopped paying me for 2 weeks and went on vacation for the following week. I decided the day after he left was the best time to quit. I used a burner email with the company's name in it to send all the evidence I had gathered to about 20 clients I knew were being scammed. I also emailed approximately 70 previous clients I had worked with, based on my Office PC's history, explaining exactly how they had been scammed. Then I cleared out my things from the office, turned on all the lights in my office, his office, and another office, left his fridge open, took all his candy, and set the air conditioning to 55 degrees Fahrenheit, the lowest setting in the middle of summer. This was a rented office space, so for at least a week it increased the energy bill significantly. I locked the office, broke my key off in the lock, and did not look back. Story 53. I have heard a few stories about this, and the general answer seems to be to find a way to report it anonymously. This may be based on the bias of the 3 or 4 stories I have heard, but their stories all indicate that while their reporting was helpful, it did not help their careers and may have caused them to become known as the person who called the principal, among others. If a situation needs reporting, report it, because regret is painful, especially if a dangerous situation is allowed to continue. Story 54. I have been in your position. I kept quiet but started carefully documenting everything. I had very diplomatic conversations, playing dumb about the issues to ask questions and get responses in writing via email. I blind carbon copied and forwarded everything to my private email. When I was ready, I blew the whistle. I was fired immediately, but I expected that, had planned ahead, and moved on quickly. Took 2 years, about 8 phone calls and meetings with my attorney, and a couple of court dates. With all the evidence I had, which they could not lock me out of because I had secretly been blind carbon copying my private account, they gave in and settled. I received a favorable payout. I did it a second time at another company and received an even larger settlement. Can be done. Just be smart about it. Story 55. Step 1. Cover your actions. Document everything thoroughly. Step 2. Raise the issue in writing internally. Give the benefit of the doubt that it may be unintentional. Allow the opportunity to correct it. Make sure you document everything. Also, update your resume. This situation may become difficult. Step 3. Report the issue, anonymously if possible. Do not give your time and energy to something you feel the need to hide. Story 56. Take everything that is not secured. If you get caught, remind them that you have evidence of their actions. Story 57. Stay silent, then complain about it on social media. Legitimate. I worked for a Canadian telecommunications company that was breaking Quebec's consumer protection laws. I reported it to the government, which deflected me between various departments until I gave up. I would not have been caught, fired, or tried if I had not done the right thing. The government covered for corporations. It was not worth the time, effort, or stress. Story 58. When you decide it is time to report wrongdoing and hold them accountable, expect to face losses as you pursue it. Do not let your emotions of "I am doing the right thing" become your sole reason to keep fighting when you encounter resistance. It will drain you. If you intend to claim whistleblower protection, let them terminate your employment first. If you mention it during work, they will find other reasons to dismiss you. When you think you can use that claim, they will know what you are accusing them of, and they will use vague, unsupported determinations backed by their human resources department to dismiss your claims and undermine your efforts. In the end, they will continue as before without giving you a second thought. Story 59. I go to my supervisor and tell him what I found. I demand a raise or I will report to the authorities. If the company I work for is doing something illegal, I am at risk of getting in trouble too. If the police find out, they might assume we all knew and were involved together. If I am at risk, I should be paid triple. Story 60. Before resigning, I will collect and gather all the important data. Then I will resign and write in detail here on Reddit about the illegal activity. Story 61. It really depends on what the illegal activity is. Is the alleged conduct morally wrong in addition to being unlawful? Nobody needs to be a snitch unless the illegal activity actually needs to be reported. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.